All right, everyone. It is session 4, so it's Monday, October 16th, 6:06 p.m. Central Time. We've got a guest speaker to kick off class this morning, Guillermo Aguilar. We're going to let him talk, answer questions for like the first half hour of class or so, depending on how many questions you have, and then we'll get to the slides and then the challenges for the rest of the evening. So without anything else, Guillermo, go for it.
Sweet. Awesome. Thank you for having me, Charles. I don't know if Charles mentioned this, but I am also an alum, just like Charles. I graduated from Platoon. Again, my name is Guillermo. I just want to go over the application process. Can everyone hear me okay? Yes? All right. So the application process, I like to think of it as 4 parts, and I'm going to go through all 4 parts right now. So the first part's super simple. It's just basic information of your service, where you served and what cohort you're applying to. So part 1's super easy. Part 2 is a little bit longer. It involves a couple short answer questions and then a video that asks you a couple personal questions, and then also asks you to kind of go over one of the application coding challenges. So that's the second part. And then the third part that I think is probably the one that people miss most of the time is getting enough points in the Coder Right challenges. That's part 3 of the application. There's 12 challenges. There is a minimum that we can't unfortunately share with you, but you need to try to get as many points as you possibly can. The first 10 challenges of the 12 are relatively straightforward, so you should be able to try and get max points on those. The last 2 are really tough, so if you can only get a couple points on those, that's perfectly fine. And then the last part of the application is once you're accepted and you attend one of the intro calls with the founder and CEO, Rod Levy, and a couple of his staff, then you have to take a live technical assessment. And the live technical assessment, I conduct most of them. They're very short. It's 3 short challenges, and it's pretty much just a vetting process to make sure you didn't cheat on your application and just use ChatGPT for all the Coder Right challenges. And the technical assessment is easier than pretty much all the challenges on the application. We're not looking to check how much you know. We're checking if you have the minimum understanding of basic programming fundamentals to come to our program. So that's why the live technical is there. So those are the 4 parts of the application process. So the deadline for 2 of the upcoming cohorts, as most of you already know, which is probably the reason why you're here, for the upcoming Foxtrot Platoon, the deadline is November 5th. Keep that in mind. And for the upcoming Whiskey Platoon, which starts at the end of January next year, the deadline is November 19th. So keep that in mind. We also have the Bravo DevOps Platoon with a deadline of April 15th of next year. So that's a little bit of information on the upcoming cohorts and the application process. The last thing that I want to cover is just some common mistakes that I see on the application, so that way you don't make them. The number 1 mistake that I see on the application is not meeting the minimum number of points in the Coder Right challenges. You need to try to get as many points as you can, but if you don't, then you apply, let's say you apply early, which I encourage everyone to do. Apply early. And let's say you don't meet the minimum number of points in your Coder Right challenges, you'll get a courtesy email from me saying, hey, so-and-so, you have failed to meet the minimum requirements. The deadline is such and such. Please resubmit your Coder Right challenges. And you don't have to redo the application again or anything like that. I just want you to try to see if you can attempt them again. You can attempt the application Coder Right challenges an unlimited amount of times. So you can try them 100 times if you want, as many as you need to get the points required. So that's the number 1 mistake that I get, and that's probably the most common email that I send out as the pre-work instructor. You didn't meet the minimum requirements in the Coder Right challenges. The second most common mistake that I see is you didn't include a YouTube video, or your YouTube video is private. So I have to send you an email, be like, hey, can you make your YouTube video, public but unlisted so I can watch it? So lately we've had a couple of people that, for whatever reason, don't want to post to YouTube, and that's totally acceptable. We've had a handful of people send me a private Google Drive link with their video, and that's also acceptable. If you don't want to post on YouTube, you feel weird about that, or you have some security concerns or whatever the case may be, that's awesome. Send me a private Google Drive link to my email, or just link it in your application, and I'll have access to it. That works just fine. The third most common mistake is applying late or applying the day of. Sometimes people will that our deadline's always on like a Sunday at like midnight, I'll have people apply to like 11:36 p.m. and then they'll fall short on the coder by challenges. And if you're one of those persons, I'm going to auto reject you. There is no courtesy email if you waited until the last 30 minutes of the application window, right? However, if you, let's say you send your application months before, you're going to get that courtesy email. Even if you send that application like 3 days before the deadline, you're going to get that courtesy email if you fall short, right? I just don't give that courtesy email to people that wait within the last couple of hours because there's no time anymore, right? There's no time for you to go in there and really improve your score. You probably won't even read my email by the time the deadline is already passed. So that's why I don't send courtesy emails for anyone that applies within the last couple of hours. So keep that in mind. Applying late. Number 4 is underestimating how long the application is going to take you and underestimating how long it's going to take you to ramp up. It's awesome that you take this intro to coding class. But I'm sure, as Charles has probably already told you, it's not enough for the application and it's not enough for the program. This is just a start, right? This is kind of to get you a little more support, to get you more motivated, to get you kind of on the right path, right? But you definitely need to put in that extra time if you really want to improve quickly. And if you're going to a bootcamp, that's something you should think about pretty much every day, right? How can I improve as fast as humanly possible? Because I have this target date, I'm going to start and I'm going to try to get a job. So those are the 4 most common mistakes. And here's the last thing that I have for you, just some things to keep in mind. A common email that I get is that CoderByte is wrong or the challenges are wrong. Does send me email saying that CoderByte is wrong. CoderByte's never been wrong, but I still get those emails. That's why I have to always bring it up. And the second thing I want you to keep in mind is don't be intimidated by anyone that comes from an IT background or some kind of technical background. I've come to realize, and Charles could probably agree to this, whatever your pedigree is doesn't really matter. The person matters more, and how much effort and how much focus you're going to put into this is what ultimately is going to make the difference, whether you succeed in this career or not. We've had literally in my almost 2 years here, and Charles can attest to this as well, pretty much every kind of person under the sun come through this program, from crazy backgrounds, from dishwashers at Olive Garden to like, I had an air traffic controller last cohort. I hope I'm not, like doxing her, but we've had literally people from all walks of life, and everyone has managed to be successful. So if you come from, nursing, IT, washing dishes at Olive Garden, I used to do that. You're going to be just fine as long as you focus and, put in the work. There's no shortcuts here. All right, that's all I have, Charles. I hope I didn't ramble too long.
Nope, you're good. Yeah, so this is the point where you get a chance to ask some questions, and this is where, and I'm going to highlight the most common trap of this. Like, I do not deal with the pre-work. I don't know what the pre-work is. I don't know what all of the challenges are on the application. I've solved a bunch of them like a year ago, but I don't know them off the top of my head. And so what will happen is you have Guillermo for another 15-20 minutes to ask him questions. No one will ask him questions, and as soon as he leaves, everyone will start asking me questions. And I do not know the answer to Guillermo questions. I only know the answer to Charles questions. So if you have a question, please unmute and ask him while we still have him, and or throw it in the chat so that he can answer them. But feel free, if someone's got a question, to throw it out there.
Hey, Guillermo.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
You're good, Sean. Go for it.
Okay. Hey, Guillermo. So the application says that all of the challenges have to be completed like in one sitting, but it sounds like from your explanation that that's not the case, and we have, like we can pause it or whatever and come back to it. Is that so? How long do we have to do that?
You have an almost unlimited amount of time, and you can take them, as I said, as many times as you want. But here's some weird things that I've run into. people changing computers and doing some of their challenges on their work computer or their significant other's computer, and then I get multiple submissions. That's not going to work. Or sometimes people will like clear their cache or something weird with some of their passwords, and they'll clear their Chrome web history and erase all the cookies. Okay, that's going to set you back as well. So I've seen a bunch of weird stuff. The recommendation that I can give you is yes, you get as much time as you want, and yes, you don't have to do it all in one sitting, right? But I would attempt to do it within a week and use the same computer and don't clear any of your cookies or your cache or anything like that, because that will erase your progress.
All right, thanks.
I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, perfectly. Thank you.
Yeah, and
Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, go for it.
Oh, I had this question right here by JP. Are there any websites that you would recommend for attending the bootcamp? I'm going to give the same recommendation that I always give. I pretty much built my career on Code Wars just because I think it's a really amazing website for new developers. The 8 Kayus are the easiest coding challenges. There's only like 350. There might be 400 now. 8 Kayus, I would do all of them. All 400 Kayus, 8 Kayus. And then after that, do a couple 107 Kayus, and then you're ready for the famous LeetCode or Hacker Rank or CoderBite. But I think when you're just starting out, like, you really need to learn the syntax, and I think that's where this website right here excels. You really need to know the syntax of the programming language you're trying to learn, and then you can kind of figure out the logic. And you can see right there that the ranking there, that's even my burner account, the G Aguilar, that's me. I just did that for Code Platoon. It's not like a real account or anything. But yeah, and you can see people that have just done a bunch of them. So that's also the data structures and algorithms course of Free Code Camp. I think that's the best free JavaScript course on the internet. I've done it myself like 3 times. That beginning to end, it's going to take you a while, but that course is awesome. So those are the 2 resources that I always recommend. And then when people are like, oh, I already did part of it, or I've already done, a couple dozen Code Wars, my answer is always what Charles' answer is going to be: do it again. And if I always think the Jocko Willink, like, good, like if you're doing your CoderBite challenges and then it erases them all, good, do them again. Because I guarantee you need more practice. I can sit here with 2 years experience in this role and look at you dead in the eyes and tell you, you are not very good right now. Do it again. Do it 10 more times. You'll thank me later.
Hi, Guillermo. I had a follow-up question. How long did it take you to work from, I think it starts at Caillou 8, and I see you made it up to Caillou 3.
Oh, so how long? This is a really tricky question to answer because I get this question a lot. Like, how long should the pre-work take? How long should I be dedicating? It just depends how much focus time you have. But I would say you're putting in how many hours into this course, Charles? 20 a week-ish?
Well, so 27 hours of instruction for the course. So
okay,
3 weeks.
Okay, so 9 hours of instruction
a week.
Yeah. Okay. So if you can, like, so you're doing 9 weeks of instruction a week. If you put in another 15 during this program, and then see if you can get 15 or 20 every week leading up to the cohort, that would be a really, really good start. I think, again, going back to my most common mistakes is people underestimate how long it's going to take. And I'll go ahead and say this right now. During the last intro meeting that we had last week, people were messaging me right away. They wanted to take their live technical assessment because they know they have to take one. They messaged me, but these are people going to whiskey. I mean, they don't start till January 29th. And I was like, are you sure you don't want more time to practice? They're like, no, we're ready. They proceeded to take it the next day. All 3 of them failed. They couldn't get past the first challenge, and it was just a basic loop variable.
There are no happy endings.
That's all it was.
Guillermo stories.
That's all it was. And I was like, you have months to train. Like, go trade. No one was they were pushing me, and they're like, "Hey, your Calendly link isn't updated." I was like, "Let me update it. I'm sorry, that was for the last cohort." They're on me to get it fixed, and I was like, "This isn't going to go well." Why? Because so there's a famous. I used to be a teacher, so and many of you are probably maybe familiar with this really famous study where they asked a teacher if they thought they were better than the average teacher in the classroom, and like 75% of them said yes, which is statistically impossible. I think the same thing happens in programming. People think that they're better than they think they are. And the other piece of advice that I always give is, and you're going to hear me say this when we have our check-ins, when you apply to our program, you need to be twice as good as you think you are, because when someone watches you code, you're going to forget half the stuff you know.
Yeah, that's very true. It's if anyone in class has had to like speak in front of a camera before or live audience, whatever you're doing just got far more difficult than when you're just doing it by yourself at your desk. And so it is, and I mean, one of the ways to do that is to practice in front of people. Like if you've got someone else learning coding, or I know the last class kind of started like a study group, like doing a challenge with a partner, like working through it, like how we kind of break into this in class, and getting comfortable speaking with other people is all part of the process of learning how to do this. Anyone else have any other questions? Here's one. So during the boot camp, is there leeway for those who are in the reserves that might have to be gone for 2 weeks at the end of the course? There is leeway for people in the reserves, but I will say that like the last 2 weeks of the course is the most important part of the course. That's when you do your capstone. So, and I don't think that either myself or Guillermo would have like a final ruling on that. That would be one that you would want to reach out to Greg Drobny over, and he would have to bring it to like the director of education to get an answer on that one.
Charles' answer is perfect. And I'll add on a little bit of this, because this is what I tell my brother and sister that have been trying to get in tech for a long time. And I tell this to my brother and sister who I love dearly. You're not good enough to take time off. I tell them that. Like, you're not. That's a luxury for people that are good. You're not there yet. You will get that one day. And you can be one of those FANG employees that puts in 20 hours a week and makes 200K. Cool. That day will come. That day is not today. And it probably won't be tomorrow either. So try to take as little time off as possible, which is actually also one of my pieces of advice to you right now. You should be coding every day. Even if it's only 30 minutes, you should not be taking any days off. It's hard to forget something when you just did it 18 hours ago, 16 hours ago, 20 hours ago, right? Not even a whole day passed and you're studying again. You're not going to forget.
Yeah, and that is like from the other side of that coin, like that is something like depending on your command. Like, I mean, when I went through, I know I had someone that was in the reserve that deferred their 2 weeks so that it didn't interfere while they were in class. Like usually like you can get some sort of an excuse notice or something like that when you're doing something like this, but obviously it's something your command would have to approve ahead of time.
Yeah, we got this question in the intro to coding last week, and a guy asked about splitting. A guy asked about reservist week in the first couple of weeks of the boot camp, and my advice to him was see if you can pre-drill or split those drills ahead of time. You really don't want to miss time right at the beginning, because that's typically when people are trying to get their feet underneath them for the program. So that's my advice: try to miss as little time as possible.
I have a question for you. I do have a question
Go.
about the when we're doing the test problems. Does it just matter that we get the points, or do we want to make it as concise as possible? I know as we're learning here with Charles, he wants us not to use methods, and I appreciate that, and I want to struggle to be able to do it without methods. But sometimes my code is long and clunky then, even though it's right. So do I want to work on,
There's no style points.
okay. So long and clunky isn't going to make me look bad or like I don't know how to do it quicker.
An ugly solution that works is always better than a pretty solution that doesn't.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, so go for the points right now in your career.
Okay. Thanks.
So, and the other caveat that I want to make sure that we're clear, Kim, is that I say like the example I use is like, don't use a dot map or a dot for each until you're comfortable writing a for loop. And write a dot map with a callback function in it, or a for each with a callback function in it, and abstracting away what a loop actually does is a lot of concepts that make it harder to learn how a loop actually works. If you know how to write a loop already, like if you're comfortable with a for loop, use the for each, use the dot map, right? Like I'm not holding anyone back, but what I'm saying is don't use a built-in method that you don't know exactly what it's doing, because then you're not learning when to identify when to use that basic building block.
I appreciate that. There isn't any way to see the code behind a method, is there?
There is. In VS Code, you can, not in Replit so much, but in VS Code, you can actually dig into the source code of the underlying language.
Okay, that sounds fun.
And I'll give you and I'll give you a spoiler right now. All those fancy methods, they're just a loop. They're just a loop underneath. They're just a loop.
Okay.
They're a linear search underneath. That's it. There you go. That's the cheat code. So when Charles says get good at a loop, it's because everything is a loop.
I like that. Thanks.
Any other questions, guys?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Paula.
Hi. So as soon as you're done with the application process, the for part, how soon after that do you get a yes or a no?
It varies anywhere from like a day to like a week. Like if I get one application that comes in, I typically won't bother, but sometimes I'll get like, especially close to the deadline. Typically what happens is, let's say 100 people apply to a cohort, 50 of the applications will come in right before, or, weeks or months before, and then like the other 50 will come like the day of. So if you're one of those, like the day of, it might take me a little bit more because I got a bunch of applications. But if there's like 3 or 4 that come in like a couple of weeks out, then you might hear it the next day. It just depends when I get to, like a day to a week. Typically.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
Sorry. Yeah, I've got a follow up to that. So after the application deadline, I'm assuming that nothing is actually, no decisions are made until after the application deadline to give everybody a fair shake. So after that, about how long does it take to find out whether we were accepted or not?
A couple of days, because our turnaround time is pretty tight. So after the deadline, I try to finish them most of the time within 24 hours. But sometimes it takes 2 days, and sometimes people will have like really crazy like situations. They'll be like on a boat and be like, "Hey, can I have a day to finish it? Because I don't have any internet." And it will be like, "Yeah," but yeah, typically a day.
Yeah, and also to clarify, there is no waiting until everyone applies to give the decision. Like this is not, you're the only person you're competing with is yourself in the application. So if 50 people qualify for the cohort, 50 people are going to get an acceptance letter. And there's always some attrition in there, but it's not like a first come, first serve basis. And Code Platoon will adjust. I mean, I think for the full-time immersive, there's still 2 instructors, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so 2 instructors, and then like if they've got 30 people in the class, they may have one TA. If 45 people are in the class, they may then have 2 or 3 TAs that are assisting the instructor. So Code Platoon will scale up, and I don't think a cohort's ever gone much over like the mid 40s. And what they're usually shooting for is anywhere from like 35 to 45 people in a cohort. And that's usually like what they're staffed for. But it's not a like if you passed everything, but like you applied on the last day and there was already 40 people that made it. It's not like we tell you, sorry, like wait till the next one. It's anyone that qualifies gets an invitation.
Good to know. Thank you.
Would that apply for the evening and weekend program as well?
For all the programs.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, guys?
I have one more question,
Mhm.
kind of on the same thing, on the same topic. So what about if we're applying for like the scholarships? Do we get an answer right away as well?
So the scholarship is going to take a little bit longer, but the main thing you should focus on, regardless of pretty much who you are, but especially scholarship people, is run through the pre-work, prepare really well, get through the pre-work and pass the live technical assessment. Because the minute that you pass the live technical assessment, I give Tish the go, hey, this person can be vetted for a scholarship. Until you pass the live technical assessment, you technically can't get a scholarship.
Okay, thank you.
So this is rare, but we've had 1 or 2 incidents where people were given a scholarship and then didn't pass the live technical assessment. That has happened. It's rare, but that's, and I chalk that up to, and this is kind of a weird thing that I don't really know what to make of. People will wait to see if they get the scholarship before going all in and dedicating a lot of their time to making this dream or this goal of theirs work. And I think that's the wrong approach. Because if this is really your dream, or this is really what you want to do, then scholarship or no scholarship, come hell or high water, you're going to make it work. And there's been a couple of instances where people didn't really want to commit to the studying, only to find out they got the scholarship and couldn't come to the cohort, right? They about cried. That's tough.
Yeah, and so a couple of things here. One, I mean, obviously, right, like we don't want to put the cart before the horse, but also I don't know of anyone really that like has applied for a scholarship and not gotten some form of scholarship. I don't like on the application process on the Code Platoon website, like I mean, there's a drop down of like what scholarship you're going for, and there's like I mean, based on like race, gender, things like that. But then there is also like some more generic scholarships that are funded by Code Platoon's corporate partners, right? And so there's scholarships for everyone out there, like regardless of where you're coming from. For me personally, and like obviously if you need a scholarship, you go for the scholarship. It greatly reduces, like I mean, we're talking like knocking 85-90% off the cost of like what the tuition is for most of these scholarships. Vet Tech is a great option. SkillBridge is a great option. Greg Drobny is going to go more into that stuff when he comes and talks to the class next week. But if you do have that coveted GI Bill available, like this is, especially if you're going to be on location in Chicago, you get not only are you getting Code Platoon paid for like 100%, you're also getting BAH for Chicago while you're attending, which is also like, I mean, a really nice kicker when you're working, like when you're doing this and you're not able to work. And no one's really asked it yet, but there is no like maintaining another form of employment while you're trying to go through Code Platoon. I mean, it is I mean, just the instruction alone and like the in-time class part is probably close to 50 hours a week. And then, I mean, you're given homework every night, like you're given homework over the weekends. Like it is a boot camp in the true sense, where like, I mean, like you are scrambling for probably the first 6-7 weeks of class before things start to slow down and get more complicated, and they allow you to start getting some rest so that your brain can tackle some of the more complex things that are going on in class at that point. The other thing I kind of wanted to have Guillermo expound on is within that live technical assessment. So like if we looked at Whiskey Platoon that has a November 19th cutoff, I filled out the application today and I got all the points I needed. You tell me tomorrow, like my application's good to go. I've been accepted. I'm in the pre-work. What does that look like leading up to like the 11/19 cutoff and like the January 29th start date?
So leading up to the cutoff date, you'll be, the minute that you're accepted, you're going to get a calendar invite. It's a Zoom intro call where you can ask our founder and CEO, Rob Levy, and some of their staff, any questions that you have about, SkillBridge, about your specific circumstance, about the program. I'm in there a lot of the time, about anything that you need to know about the program. And then you'll receive an email from me with it includes all the pre-work. And that free code camp, JavaScript data structures and algorithm course, that's actually week 1 of our pre-work. But that was there before I got here. I just happen to love it too. And you're going to work through the pre-work until you feel you're ready for the live technical assessment. The live technical assessments, you get 2 cracks at it. If you don't pass it the first time, that's totally fine. I'll give you some pretty, I think some pretty good feedback about what exactly I'm testing and what you need to improve upon. And then you'll come back and retake it. The passing rate, I don't want to scare anyone. The passing rate is super high, guys. Really, very few people don't pass the technical assessment. I think between both attempts, the passing rate is like above 95%. So if you do the pre-work and you prepare and you've gone through intro to coding, our intro to coding success rate is obviously higher because you've been in the pipeline, you've gained some confidence, you've gained some skills, and then you're more capable and more apt to kind of handle the application and the program. So you're accepted, you attend the intro to coding class, you get the pre-work, you work through the pre-work, then you schedule a live technical assessment with me, you pass your technical assessment with me, and then you can ask me any questions that you need exactly where you're at. Typically, when you pass your live technical assessment with me, you pass it in JavaScript or Python. At that point, I typically tell you switch to the other language. So if you pass your technical assessment in JavaScript, I tell you, okay, good, switch to Python until the beginning of the cohort. If you pass it in Python, I say, okay, switch to JavaScript for the remaining of the cohort. It's a good, I'm jumping a little ahead, but I'm giving you kind of the full breadth of exactly what happens. It's really good to have a pretty decent understanding of both languages before you come to the program, so it doesn't surprise you. I know initially, at least in my cohort, people were a little grumpy about, hey, I barely know JavaScript. How am I supposed to learn Python? But so in order to avoid that, you want to be at least introduced to both of them. And I'm sure you've heard this, if you know one language, is a whole lot easier to learn a second one. And that is true because the ideas are the same, the syntax is just different. And sometimes not that much different. So that's kind of like from acceptance to the start of the cohort, kind of the whole process. And then leading up, like especially the 4 weeks leading up to the beginning of the start day, we'll have weekly check-ins. We'll go over basic coding things or any questions you might have. There's also, leading up to the cohort, a class called Foundations of Programming you can enroll in. And it's a class that is exactly what it sounds like. We'll teach you about Linux, we'll teach you about APIs, we'll teach you some skills that are going to be really useful for you for the immersive program. And those are the 4 weeks prior to the full-time software engineering program. And it's just a pilot program, but hopefully one day it'll be more than that.
That sounds awesome. I did not get that. There was no intro to coding when I went through. There was nothing. It was just, I got an email from Rod saying, go do freecodecamp.org.
Pretty much, yeah.
That was it. So we're trying, people. We're trying. All right. So JP, I see your question in there about paying through or like getting it covered through VR&E. That will definitely be a question for Greg. And I don't think you have to wait for him to show up next week. I'll get you his contact information. If you haven't already gotten an email from him, But you can Slack him directly or email him and ask him that question, and he would be the authority on what to do as far as timing for any paperwork. All right. And so far, everyone, great questions. So I appreciate everyone getting out of their system while we still got Guillermo. Does anyone else have anything else before we let them go for the evening? And if you've already asked a question, feel free to ask another question. There's no limit. If you've got something, throw it out there. Going once, going twice. All right. Well, this is always my favorite class of the intro to coding, is having Giro drive the hype train through the middle of class. All right. Well, thanks again, man. I'll see you. I don't think I'm teaching this again until next year, but I'll see you at the next one.
For sure. Can I just say one more thing, Charles?
Absolutely.
Hey, everyone. I hope I didn't like discourage you from with my demeanor or anything that I said. This program is obviously really amazing. But the only reason why I approach it like with such like a headstrong attitude is because I'll give you some numbers here. The people that inquire about CodePlatoon, let's give an example. Let's say 100 people inquire about CodePlatoon. Less than 10% of those actually apply to CodePlatoon. Okay, so now you have, out of those 100, 10 people applied to CodePlatoon. Okay, 10 people completed an application. All right, 2 of those didn't really complete the application the right way. All right, so now you're down to 8 out of 100. And out of those 8 that got applied, right, 7, well, probably all 8 got accepted, but 1 of them didn't return my emails and then just disappeared into thin air. So now you have 7. So out of those 7, 3 end up dropping out and only 4 end up actually coming to CodePlatoon. Think about those numbers. I just gave you a rough estimate of the CodePlatoon pipeline, right? So out of those 100, really, we only get about 4% of those people that actually go through our program and then succeed and then get jobs and all that good stuff, you know? So the numbers are really, really, really big. And I think it bodes incredibly well that you're here right now listening to this and listening to Charles and learning. Don't be one of those 96 people. Be one of those 4 that go through CodePlatoon, succeed, and then have a really awesome job at the end. Last thing that I'll say is I wish I was independently wealthy and I didn't have to work. But if I had to pick a job, because I do, it would be a job in tech. This is the best. That's it. Sorry.
All right. I will see you at the next one. Thanks again.
Thank you, Charles. Take it easy, guys. Good luck, everyone.
All right, let's go ahead and get into the slides for tonight. There aren't a ton of them. We're going to be covering objects and some of the built-in methods on objects tonight. And then we'll take a quick break here and then we'll get into some challenges. All right, sorry, let me get caught up here with this. Let me create some notes for the evening. Jolly Rotten Brute Force Program. All right. This and this. All right. So for session 4, we're going to talk about object literals, or just objects. So we've already been working with them, right? We've got a data type that holds a collection of properties where each property is an association between a name or the key and a value, or what we refer to as key value pairs, right? And so we can just go ahead and we'll create a basic one here. So we'll say let instructor equal, we start a object with the curly braces, right? And then so we'll do first name Charles, oops, comma separated, last name Kubiak, age 42. Let's see here. Say knows JS, true. years as dev is 4. All right, so we've got some strings, we've got a number, we've got a Boolean, we've got a number. We'll go for cats, right? And so we can do a nested object in here, right? So we can say Todd, right? We can say age 15. We'll call colors, right? And we can do an array in here. So we can say black and white, right? And so we can do, whoops, that. And we'll say nugget. And we'll say age 3, colors, gray and white, right? And so now we've got an object here. I'll say console.log, and let's take a look at our object. And we can see the whole thing, right? And so first name is a string, last name's a string, a number, a Boolean, another number, and then we've got an object nested in here, right? And then within the object, we've got a key, and then the value is another object. And so we've got an object, or I'm sorry, a number, and then we've got an array. And because this is a couple layers deep, it's just saying array instead of actually spelling out what's in the array. And that's just to save space with the replit and the memory that it's using. But I could do something like this. So remember, we can do bracket notation where I say, let's look at cats, right? And then now we get the actual array of what's going on here. Because I did do all one word keys, nothing's in quotes here. We can use dot notation, but remember the gotcha of dot notation is that if there's ever a like human readable string in here, I like to call it, where I do something like this for first name so that the key prints out nicely, you will not be able to use dot notation for this anymore, and you have to use bracket notation. All right, whoops, that is not what I want to do. There we go. And so, right, and if I run this, just like the dot notation, it's the same thing as doing this. Right, both times that I get it, I get my object with the cats with the additional nested objects, right? So layer 1, layer 2, layer 3, layer 4, right? Like, so this is a array nested inside of an object, nested inside of an object, nested inside of an object. All right, and if I were to do something even larger that says class, right, then we could have instructor, and we do it as an array, and then we could have instructor and basically like an array of objects. And then we could create this same object for everyone in the class, right? And now we're dealing with the type of information that we would be doing with a web application. All right, so an object literal keys and values do not have to be just string data types. They can be other types as well, right? So you can do that. Basically, like what they're talking about here is all the different things that it can be. All right, so again, the dot syntax and the bracket syntax, we just covered that. And let's see here, and then using the for in loop, basically your check for containment against the existing keys, right? Or I'm sorry, when using in, so which is the same thing as doing a built-in method, which is has own property. Sorry, I got a little ahead of myself there. Right, so if we wanted to look at something like this, we could say, oh, where is it here? Sorry. So with the in, I should be able to just console.log that. So let me try that here. So console.log cats in instructor. right? And there's my true. So that's saying that that's in there. Let's look at one like say favorite food, and that is not in there. Right, so we get it to return a false. And there is a built-in method for that, which is called has owned property. Which honestly, I think you'll see that more than you will the in, but either one is perfectly acceptable. So you could do something like instructor that has own property cats, right? And I get a true. So all right, and then so we also have the ability to look at all of the keys for an object, all of the values for the object, and then all of the entries, which will give us the key value pair. And all of these will be returned in arrays. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. Comment these out. And so we could do console.log instructor. Oops. Instructor dot keys. Oops. Structure.keys is not a function. And so this is something that, and I'll show you this here. So if we do MDN object, and if we come down here and take a look at, so has own property is, and this confused me for the longest time. You don't see prototype very often in object. There's a couple of them, right? Like has own property. If we were to look at MDM array, and almost all of these have a prototype. And for the longest time, I didn't really understand how that impacted how I write the code. But basically what that means, and when we look at has own property, right, that had, it was object.prototype.has own property. Where is it? Right there. And the way I typed that was right here. So instructor, so on my object. And when we look at keys, there is just on object. And so what that means is it's literally written on object. And so instead of writing it on instructor, so basically what I have declared as an object, I have to write it directly on object and then tell it what object I'm talking about. Right? And there's the array of all of my keys. And same thing, if I come down here, and let's go back and look at this, right? So if I want to look at my values, right? So it's not on prototype, it's directly on object. And if I look at entries, it should be the same way. Right, so values. There's all my values. All right, and there's my key value pairs spit out in an array of arrays. All right, and so again, a little bit of a wrinkle here, right? So All right. More
Did you
confusing.
mean to spell objects like that?
I'm sorry, what's that?
In the beginning of line 20, did you mean to spell objects like that at the bottom? By keys?
No, no, that's just a typo. All right, so any questions on built-ins on an object? Right, and as you get more used to built-in or working with built-in methods, and again, I made the mistake too right in front of class, right? Like I went straight to instructor.keys and I got an error message, and that reminded me that I'm supposed to teach you that it's not common to call a built-in method on your defined object versus you're actually calling it on the object type. So when in doubt, just remember, go back, like if you try it and like if you type in a built-in method and it doesn't work, like check it out on MDN, like if it's on an object, an array, a string, a number, whatever, MDN, and then the data type, go back in there. And if there's a prototype within the description, that means that you can call it on basically the object variable name, right? So in our case, like instructor, but if there's no prototype in there, that you're actually calling it on the class, right? And there are some examples of this in array, and so on, but and string and number will probably have some as well, but you'll notice like with object, the vast majority of these built-ins are called directly on the object type. All right, and that is it for the slides for session 4. So again, any questions that anyone has on what we've got going on here? Okay, so let me go ahead and pause the recording here. All right, everyone, well, welcome back. It is 7:06 p.m. So back from the break, let's go ahead and start. Well, and before we jump into a challenge, does anyone have any questions for me about anything we've talked about in class up until this point? No? Okay.
So I got one
Yes.
question. I'm sorry.
Absolutely.
So with prototype and MDN, I guess I'm still just slightly confused about the difference between prototype and when it doesn't have prototype.
So and I don't know the exact meaning of prototype but what it means for you is that when you see like let's look at something that we use a lot, right? Like you're going to use pop and push a lot, right? So when you see array.prototype.pop, this prototype basically is just telling you that you're going to write it on your array, right? So not on the type, on the array that you've created, right? So plants.pop. Excuse me. And when you don't see that prototype there, you are going to be writing it directly on the type, right? So again, like object.prototype.hasOwnProperty, if we look at that one, we have to define an object and we give it a property, and then we say object.one has own property, and then the name of the property that we're looking for, and we'll either get true or false. If it does not have that prototype in there, right? So if we were looking at object.keys, see how we've created object.one with 3 key value pairs in here. We are writing .keys directly on the object type, and then we are telling it what object to look inside, right? And so it's the same thing for array, right? So like where we say array of, notice how I am not writing, like I did not declare an array. I am writing this directly on array, right? So a static method creates a new array instance from a variable number of arguments. And so when you don't see the prototype, you are writing it directly on the type. So array of, another one, let's see here, is there, I think like is array, so that's checking if something is an array, right? So if I wanted to do something like that, right, so I say let cats equal this, let me say Todd, Mo, Nugget, and Nino, and we say, if I say cats dot is array, right? I'm fully expecting at this point I should get an error message, right? Is array is not a function on cats. And the reason being is because it is written directly on array. And so I write is array on array, and then I give it my array that I'm looking for, right? I should get true. Whoops, I didn't console.log it. True. So this is an array, right? So if I say let string equal, and I do this, I should now get false because it's not an array, it's just a string.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so on MDN, well, I'll put a note in here. All right. Any other questions? Okay, so before we get into the challenges, I'm going to go over the two sites that Guillermo mentioned here real quick. So one of them is freecodecamp.org. We've already talked about this one, but this is the site, right? So this is freecodecamp.org. It is 100% free. Every once in a while, you'll get like a pop-up saying like, hey, please donate. But it, like, if you don't, like, you're never forced, like it doesn't unlock anything additional. Everything on the site is 100% available for free, right? And it is part of, like, it sounds like they go over some of it in the pre-work, but doing this before you get to the application will probably be a huge help. And what it does is it takes, and again, like there's a lot of individual sections here. So 113, 29, 33, 12, 20, 16, 24, 21, and then like the 5 capstone challenges. But a lot of these are pretty easy. Like in literally the first one is write a comment, right? And so bam, I already finished the first one, right? Submit, go to the next challenge. And this one is good because you are doing it at your own pace. There is no like audio with it or video or anything. There's something to read for each of them, but they give you a little bit of a reading section, some examples, and then a space to actually solve the challenge. And it breaks down a lot of the concepts that I'm lumping together into larger, more comprehensive subjects because of the time of class, and it breaks it down into individual lessons, right? So storing values with the assignment operator, like this is all stuff that you're already doing in the challenges. And it's also going to go over some things that I didn't necessarily cover with you, just because again, I don't have time to cover all of this. But so like these are great, and just like Guillermo said, like there's repetition here. So making it through this is will be a huge help in making it through the application. And then also right, so like this is all kind of the older style, and then they have a ES6 like kind of primer that goes again into like the fat arrow functions and some of the more up-to-date JS syntax, regular expressions, which I do not cover in the intro course. The you will not like regular expressions. Well, statistically, like 1 person and out of every 1 million programmers will like regular expressions. So maybe you will. But there's a very popular saying in programming that says if you have a problem that requires regular expressions to solve, you have 2 problems. And then debugging, which is great. And then they start to get into the basic algorithm scripting. We don't cover object-oriented programming in here, but this is a great primer. You will absolutely have to learn object-oriented programming before you graduate Code Platoon. Like it is a core part of it. And quite honestly, the vast majority of software in use today is object-oriented. Functional programming, whatever isn't written as object-oriented programming is written as functional programming. And then the intermediate algorithm scripting. So this is more challenges. Again, so repetition here, getting through solving some of these. And then basically the JavaScript algorithms and data structure products, these are larger, more challenging problems that you will solve. You get a little certificate from this. Don't do it for the certificate, do it because it's going to help you learn JavaScript. There's also plenty of other stuff you can get into on here. All of these courses are free. And the other thing I'll throw out there is there are plenty of challenge sites out there. Project Euler, LeetCode, HackerRank, lots and lots of other challenges or challenge sites. I like Code Wars as well, mainly because you can join the Code Platoon clan, and all of these people are like have either gone to Code Platoon or students that were studying to go. Lamar was actually, he was in my intro to coding class last year. He has since gone through Code Platoon, and I think he graduated in the most recent cohort. But yeah, there's like, I like being able to see what people are working on. Again, these are graded from like easiest to hardest. And I would say that if you are getting to the 6 Caillou or however it's pronounced, you would probably do fairly well in the application. Like if you're taking like the level 6 ones and you're knocking them out. Now, that being said, like Guillermo and myself are probably not capable of doing like the third Caillou challenges. And honestly, there is no reason to go above like the 5th level. And the reason being is that like, so you get points for however many, like depending on the level of difficulty that you do. The 8th ones are very rudimentary. The 6th and 7th level ones are going to be like in your algorithm challenges that are going to be on the Code Platoon application, maybe some 5th level ones. But once you hit like the 3rd and 4th level ones, they stop being run-of-the-mill programming challenges, and they basically become like optimization challenges where you need like a traditional computer science and mathematics background, right? So like n parasitic numbers ending in n. No clue how I would solve this. And honestly, it would probably take me going back to school, or without just outright looking up the answers, like take me weeks, if not more than a month, to like figure out how to actually solve this thing. And nothing you will work on in this will help you get into Code Platoon, right? So get through the 8s as quickly as you can. Push yourself. Like if you're knocking out 8s, move to 7s, right? Like even if the 7s are difficult and they slow you right back down, like don't do challenges because they're easy. Do challenges because they're challenging. And it's the same thing. Like once the 7s become easy, like you should be pushing yourself to move up to that, like the 6th level, regardless of what rank they actually assign you, because it doesn't matter what rank you have over here. This just shows how many points you have. You can grab one from any level. And so getting those like 6s and 7s out of the way and getting that repetition in there is really what's going to help you on the application. Again, at Code Platoon or pretty much any other coding camp that would require that you have some sort of technical challenge to get into it. All right. So that's it for those two, and I'll drop links in tonight's thing. But let's get to some actual challenges here. All right, so I believe we were going to be looking at remove zeros tonight. All right, so let's grab this. Oops. All right, false, false. That's what I'm looking for. So let's talk about what we've got going on here. So we need to write a function that returns a number with all of the zeros removed from it. All right, so we're going to get one parameter. Those. And we're going to return one thing, which is going to be a number containing no zeros in it. All right, see below. And so let's talk about what we need to do here. So right now, there are so basically we've talked about this with arrays, but one other thing I'll show you here, right? So if I say let R equal 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And then I console.log my array. So there's my array. How do I only look at the number 3? What do I have to console.log down here? Anyone want to take a stab at that? So it's index. And so the index of the number 3 is 2, right? So we kind of start counting from 0. So 0, 1, 2. And that will give me just the number 3. Now, if I do a string, right, and I say 1, 2, 3, 4. And I want to look at just the number 3, I can do the same thing. Right? It's white instead of gold, which tells me I'm looking at a string instead of a number. But strings have index positions just like arrays do. Now, lastly, if I take a number and I put in the number 1, 2, 3, 4, and I say console.log num2 undefined. Numbers do not have a index position in them. All right. And the other thing that we'll run into with this challenge, so let's go ahead. So numbers do not have an index position is if I do something like this. So if I do a number, so console.log, right, and I run this, notice how I get this weird number and I don't get any leading zeros, right? And so there are no leading zeros when you're dealing with a number, and it's also throwing off how it calculates the number when I do this, all right? Versus if I turn this into a string, strings do have leading zeros, right? Like, because it's just a string, it's not an actual number, it's just a string representation of a number. Pretty much put anything you want to inside of a string. All right, so that is kind of a trap within this one as well. So numbers do not have an index position. How can I convert my number into something with an index position? How can I then check each individual digit to see if it's a 0 or not? If it is a 0, what action do I take? Not a 0, what action take? All right. So with that, we've got 8 people in class. So I'm going to do 2 groups of 4. Same rules apply as always. So pick one person to share their screen. Everyone try and contribute. If you have already solved this problem or if you know the solution, please don't just solve it for the rest of the group, but feel free to advise and help them push their learning. Once you are done, message me directly, or if you're absolutely jammed up, message me directly and I'll hop in to see what I can do to help you out. But once your group is done, message me so that you're not, both groups aren't just sitting there twiddling their thumbs in the breakout room. I'll pull you back. But with this one, it is 7:28 right now. I'm going to give everyone, or I'm going to give both groups 25 minutes to solve this one, or 26 minutes roughly. I'll pull everyone back in at 7:55 and we'll go over the solution together unless you solve it before that. So let me go ahead and pause recording. All right, everyone, welcome back from the Remove Zeros Challenge. So we're going to go over this in class now. So again, we already did the prep work, but I'm going to try and solve this step by step. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to comment one of these out just to make sure that I'm getting this correctly. All right, so if we take a look, we'll just do a console.log number. Right, and so there's our number. Let me comment this stuff out. Right, so there's our number, 1001. Now, I know that I don't have a index value within my number. So I'm going to need to change this to something that has an index value. But I'm also going to need to change this so that I can find or look at just one digit at a time. But the first step is to get this into something that we can look at each, or basically look at it by index position. So let's see here, I believe, let's see, convert number to string JS, right? So to string. And so let's go ahead and try that. So let's go ahead and do number dot to string. Right, and so now I see my 1001 over here. It's in white. I know that I'm working with that. If I do something like this, all right, there's my index position. So it's a good start. Now, there's another built-in method here that we haven't really talked about yet in class, but this one gets used all the time. And that is, how do I split apart a string into an array in JavaScript? All right, and that is the dot split method. All right, and so string dot prototype dot split. And if we take a look at this here, so the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog, and we do split, and they're looking at just assigning that, so they're not showing it. But if we delete this here real quick, and we just look at words, so when I run this down here, I get an array, and each word is and from the string is then split into its own string element inside of the array. And that is with giving it a empty space. If I don't give it anything and just give it an empty string, when I do that, we'll run this again, right? Every single letter, including the spaces, are given, are basically turned into their own element. So I definitely want to give it with that space in there. And if you don't give it anything, then it just takes the entire thing and puts it inside of an array. But we know that we want to give it an empty, or sorry, not an empty string, a string with one space in it. Sorry, that's my to string, and I need to do dot split. Oops, sorry. What am I doing wrong? It's because there is no spaces in there. So I actually just want to give it the empty string, and it gives me each string representation of a number as its own separate string in there. All right, so now I have something that I can work with, right? So I can take this out of my console.log, and let's say let, we'll just call it array, or R is shorthand for array. And now I need to loop through each of these and basically determine if it is a zero or any other number, right? So I can say, let's see, I believe it's 4, we'll call it digit of R, and let's console.log digit. All right, so there are my individual digits. So that's looking good. And now I could say if, well, Actually, I don't even, yeah, we'll start with an if else statement. So we'll say if digit is triple equal to string 0, right? And we have to be careful there, right? We don't want to put the number 0 there because then it would always be false no matter what, because we're working with strings at this point. We could then say digit is, and we'll reassign the value to an empty string. And we don't need an else, because if it's any other thing, we can just leave it alone. All right, and so let's see here. That is my if statement. That is my for loop. Let's go ahead and console.log r. And I've still got that there, which is not what I want. So let's do console.log. Now let's see if I ever get it. Okay, so I'm hitting it, and I should be able to reassign it. And so digit equals, see if we can reassign it to a different number here. Okay, so it's not letting me reassign it when I do it in the for of loop. So let me try this in a normal for loop, but I'm not sure if that's an oddity of a for of loop or if I'm doing something else wrong. But say I less than r dot length, I plus plus, and then before we even break into that, so we'll say r I. Oops. So there's that. And so now I want to be able to take Ri and assign the value to a empty string. And let's see if that happens. Okay, so for whatever reason, when I did the for of loop, it was not letting me access that and change those, and I don't know why off the top of my head, so I cannot explain that to you. I don't think I've ever tried to solve this with the for of loop, but when I do the standard for loop, it is allowing me to access that and change them. Now I've changed all of them to an empty string, but what I want to do at this point is now I can use my if statement. So I can say if I is triple equal to that. Now we can do this. And let's see what we got here. All right, so I've got one empty string. So that's looking good to me. So now when we do this, so we've basically done what we needed to do. And kind of a hack of this is that when I convert this back to a number, or actually before I convert this back to a number, I need to undo my split. So I need to change this back from an array into a single string. And the easiest way to do that is, how do I convert an array to string JS, right? And well, I don't want the two string method, two string. Probably not asking, right? So how do I join elements of an array to a string? All right, is the join method. So to produce a new string. And so if I come back over here and I say r.join, right, and we'll leave it empty to start, right, I get everything with commas. If I just give it an empty string here, all right, all of my basically empty strings just go away. They don't exist. They don't get, they're not basically being turned into a space. There's just nothing there. So it goes away. And so now I'm back to a string representation of my number with the zeros removed, right? So now I can take this whole thing and I could do parse int, right? Now I'm back to a number. So I could take this out of the console.log and return it. And now I'm true. All right, and the same thing right here, true. And so this is what I talk about with like abstracting away the loop. So what I could do here is, well, actually we'll leave it as this for right now. Let's see here. So I believe, let's see, I could do .map and we'll call it digit this if digit triple equals 0. Oops. Digit equal to a string. Let's go ahead and comment these out here real quick. And let's take a look at console.log r. I don't know if this will hit it correctly in a .map or not. No, I get undefined. Let's take a look here. Map console.log digit. So there's that. And then can I say digit equals string? Okay, so that is doing that correctly. And so if digit is triple equal to 0, that, and that. So there's that. And then let's see here. I'm gonna do this. And join whole thing. Say parse this, and this may or may not work. I'm sure if I spend enough time on it, get it to work. Join. What are you upset about? Because I'm not outside of Bren. Sorry, so opening, closing. That's why. That is for that. That is for this one up here. They don't color code them, which is honestly would be a great next step for this. And then I also need that. Let's try that. No. So this is saying on line 20. That's what I thought. So we get false. So there's something where this is not working out the way I want it to. But this is on the path to solve it with a built-in, and I could get it there. I'm not sure exactly why I'm hitting the false, but and this is what I talk about is like, even for me, like using versus like using a for loop that I can walk through, like trying to get fancy with the for of, and something was obviously holding me up there, and then like, hey, maybe I can do this all with a built-in and do this as a one-line solution. And I'm still not quite there, but when I use the for loop, I just worked my way right through it and was able to spit the answer out. And so also not to be like a cautionary tale, like, hey, I meant to screw up in front of class, but like I've obviously like coded myself into a corner and I screwed up. And using the built-in is less lines of code. Maybe it's prettier doing like, or more concise doing this as like one line, but this isn't a working solution yet versus like a few more lines of code and I know that I have a working solution there. So let me back myself out of this so that I have a good answer, and I will find out what I did wrong with this. I'll see if I can even do it with a go away. There we go, and run this. So that's all right. So there's a solution. So we'll stick with that for right now. And then any questions here on how I solve this the correct way?
I can't help but say Sandy blew me away by splitting it out by the zeros. And it just made him disappear, of course.
Yep. So yes, you could also, that is another great way to do it. So like, I believe you can do it without having to do the loop at all. So if we do, just take this and comment this out. So if we do something like, console.log number, right? And then dot to string, and then dot split, and we split on the zeros, right? So we're actually getting rid of the zeros that are in there. And then let's see here, we could do dot join everything, right? So we're back, and then dot, and then wrap this whole thing in a parsing. Right, and so that would get the answers as well. It's saying false still because I'm going to console.log, but if I do this, right, true. So this is another way to do it without doing the loop. Right, but again, say, and this is this is honestly a better solution, but with this, like if this were a challenge on the like the application, they both get 10 points. So the other thing too is like when you're working through the application, if you get all your points, like you don't need to dwell on it. If you figure out down the road, like, hey, there's a better way to do this or whatever, it doesn't matter. Like you can just move on from it. You never have to do it again. We'll do that. We'll leave this in there as one, and we'll leave that commented out. And any other questions about this one, or how this one, again, this is, like I said, this would be a better solution. It's less complex. So any questions on either one of these? Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at the next one. And I think we're going to shoot for alphabet code, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, so with alphabet code, yeah, we'll do this one next. All right, and so this one, we're going to get one parameter, which is a letter. And two, or we're going to return one thing, which is a number, which indicates the order of the letter in the alphabet. All right, example, we can say see below. And for pseudocode, right off the bat, right? And so let's solve something if we're given a lowercase letter as well. All right, so let's go ahead and we'll do this. That is in the Slack chat. And let me throw it in intro to coding. All right, let me pause the recording. All right, everyone, 8:36 p.m. Central Time. Welcome back from the Alphabet Code Challenge. So let's go ahead and go over that in class. Again, we've already done the prep work. So we're going to jump right into it. Let's say, let's go ahead and console.log our letter. All right, now first things first, we want to take care of any lowercase letters, and we just want to make sure that everything we get, whether it's uppercase or lowercase, we're going to treat it like an uppercase letter. So to do that, all I would do is use the built-in method. I believe it's to uppercase, spelling dependent there. No, that didn't do it. Again, string. What am I spelling wrong? Is it not two uppercase? Is it just uppercase? No, two lowercase. Where is two uppercase? Ah, there we go. So two uppercase. There we go. So now we're treating everything like it's an uppercase letter. And so there's a couple of different ways that we could do this. And I called it out. What type of data structure type do we want to use? Right. So probably the most cumbersome way to do this would be use like some sort of an object, right? Where we then say like A, or we could say uppercase here, A is 1 and B is 2, right? And so this would be, to me, like this is a lot of typing, right? To enter all of these in as key value pairs. In fact, you're basically doubling the amount of work that you need to do. Next would be an array, and we could say let array equal A, B, and so on here. C, right? But again, like now I'm taking each letter and I'm having to like put in quotes and commas and everything like that. So probably the way that I would try and tackle this would be to do it as a string. And so I would say let alphabet equal a string and just type in A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, and Z. All right, because remember, I can console.log 0. Oops, not just 0. I want to console.log alphabet 0. Right? And I get A. And if I do alphabet 25, I get Z. Okay, and so now I could basically, if I'm getting a letter in here, how do I find the index of something inside of an array? You want to remember that built-in method?
When the index of,
Yep, it's index of. How do I find the index of an element in an array JavaScript? All right, prototype, find index method. Again, I don't know about sheet codes, but again, MDN index of, right? Like that's what I'm looking for. And so if I say alphabet dot index of, and let's just say C, and I'm hard coding C in here, but I should get 2, right? And I get 2. And so now instead of doing a hard coded value, I can use my letter, right? And now I'm going to get actual index values except -1, which means that it's not in there. So I have to remember to do 2 uppercase. And now I should fix that -1 down there. I get 3. And notice that I'm basically 1 less than each of these. So all I need to do is then add 1 to it. Right, 1, 2, 26, 4. So that all looks pretty good to me. And then instead of console.logging it, I just need to return it. Whoops, missed a space over here. Get rid of this. That. Right, and there's my truths. Now, I will say I peeked in both groups just to see where everyone's at. And I've honestly never thought of it this way before, but I did see that one of the groups within using the string method, they just added an empty space here, right? And so now if I run this, I get false because I no longer need to even add this +1. Right, like I've just shifted everything by 1. All right, and so that's why I said there's like 3 or 4 different ways to solve this, right? This would be 1, this would be 2. This would be the third way. Now, the last way, and again, a solution I hadn't previously thought of, but I had a student come up with this in the last class, is that there is another built-in method. Let's go to string. And, well, not strings, I just want string. Yeah. Right, and I believe it is char code at, which will actually give you the basically like the code representing the UTF-16, right? And so if we look at let's say console.log let's see, we can just do letter dot char code at, and let's see what we get. Right, so we get 65 for A, we get 66 for B, we get 90 for Z, and we get 100 for D. So we still need that 2 uppercase in there, right? So we could say dot 2 uppercase. right? And then we get 68. And then we could take all of these and basically, I think the magic number is 65 or 64 off of these, right? So basically the alphabet falls between 65 and 90. And so if we subtract 64 from each of those, we'll get the 1, 2, 26, and 4 that we need. Take this out of the console.log. I did it again. Right, and we get true, right? So with this, we don't even need a like a variable or an alphabet or anything like that to do this. And so this would be another way to do it, but this would be probably the more common way that I would expect to see it done. All right, any questions on any of the ways that I solve these? Okay, so let's go ahead. And I know it's 8:45, so let's take a look here and see what we've got. All right, so the next one is going to be a legal word, and preventing Replet's been working pretty good tonight, so I'm not going to jinx it. Basically, what I'm going to do is walk through the prep work for this, and then same thing, copy and paste it, give you guys everything we've got for that, and then we'll lead off with this one on Wednesday. So let's see here. Okay. So it's nothing to read me. All right, so write a function that takes in a sentence and an illegal word and returns a Boolean indicating whether or not the sentence contains the illegal word. Capitalization should not matter. All right, so that means that we need to make this no longer case sensitive. We know that a lot of the built-ins and when we're searching for things like index of, that those are case sensitive. So we're going to need to make sure that we solve for that again. So I'm going to actually get two params this time. First is, or both strings. First is in sentence. Second is the legal word that I'm checking against the sentence. All right, and we're going to return one thing, which is going to be a Boolean. If the legal word is in the sentence or not. All right, and so we'll say see below. Excuse me. Okay, and I believe if I go over here, right? So string dot includes, right? We'll solve this. And right. All right, so this would be the prep for this, and within this, this is something that, and again, right, like with a lot of this stuff, there's a built-in method that will solve some of these challenges in one line. And when you're doing the application or when you're writing code for your job, like use the shortest, most concise, cleanest code that tells a good story that you can possibly write. However, while we're learning, basically what I'm asking you to do is write the code behind the scenes for your own dot includes, right? Because dot includes, you could just say sentence dot includes word and it'll return true or false. And that's all you need to do to solve that. But it isn't teaching you what's happening behind the scenes and how something like that would be accomplished. And so, and this will carry over into junior level interviews, right? So pretty much all tech jobs, and I've worked in finance, I've been in the military, I've been a cashier, a pharmacy, and a restaurant, and I've been a software developer. And the only job interview I've ever had where someone asked me to demonstrate that I was technically proficient was as a software developer, right? Like I didn't go apply for a cashier at a pharmacy in high school, and they didn't put me down in front of a cash register and tell me to start hitting buttons and prove that I know how to work a cash register, right? And same thing in the military. Like when I joined the Marine Corps, like I didn't have to shoot a gun before I joined the Marine Corps, right? And like there was academic knowledge. I had to take the ASVAB and physical, like I had to do some pull-ups and a run and crunches. But when you apply to be an entry-level coder, almost every job, if not every job application, is going to have some sort of a technical interview that they're going to put you down in front of a computer. I do interviews like this for my company. You come in, there's two people from my company. You use your machine, we're on a Zoom meeting, and we give you a challenge set and you start writing code. All right. And as a junior level developer, they may give you something that seems very simple. Like popular ones are like reversing a string, doing something like this. And guess what? Like there's a string dot reverse, right? And if they say like, hey, reverse a string for me. Okay, bam, string dot reverse. Great. You know that built-in method. Now please solve that without using dot reverse, right? Because you've got an hour slated for this interview and you just solved the challenge in 30 seconds. So then they're going to see if you understand the nuts and bolts behind what you're actually doing, right? So now solve string dot reverse without using the dot reverse built-in method. Okay, so you work through that. Excuse me, you figure out that you need to do this with a for loop. Okay, cool. You solved it with a for loop. Can you solve it with a while loop, or can you solve it with dot map? Right? Like they're just going to keep making it harder to fill the time, right? And so, okay, you've done that. So, can you solve this problem using recursion? And I don't like this level or this method of interviewing. But if anyone has ever heard of the term called whiteboarding, that goes back to more like the in-person. And I've had a few interviews like this where they ask you to basically work through a algorithm problem on a whiteboard, right? And so like the computer version of that would be like, let's solve how to reverse a string in just Microsoft Word, right? Like you're not actually going to write any code. You're going to explain to me using pseudocode and just explaining it step by step, like how you're going to reverse this string for me, right? And like that's the hardest level. And if you don't think that's the hardest level, like take this challenge and on Tuesday sometime, try and write out how you would solve it without using any code. Right, without having it pulled up, without being able to do any Google searches, anything like that, and just work through the challenge and write out how you would solve it. Whiteboarding is the worst. And because usually you're doing it like standing up in front of people, like you're not in front of a computer, like you can't search for anything, like you're just doing it all from memory. And that's why I don't like whiteboarding, because being a software developer isn't about how much syntax you can remember. It's about how well you can solve problems using the tools that you have at your disposal. To me, like whiteboarding is like borderline like junior developer hazing. But much more common will be is that I will give you a problem that seems very simple on the surface, and the more you dig into it, the harder it's going to be. And if you breeze through what I've initially given you, I've probably got 2 or 3 more prompts that you don't see on the screen that I'm going to continue to push you to see exactly how far I can like push your developer skills. All right, so it is 8:55. Let me take this and drop this into the chat so everyone has access to it. Oops. Why are you? Okay, so it's telling me it's too big to put in there, so we'll just drop it over here. All right, so you have access to that as well. And so, but that is it for class. Does anyone have any questions for me about anything that we talked about tonight? Anything that we're going to be doing on Wednesday or Thursday? Anything you want to know about being a software developer in general? I'm more than happy to answer any questions you have. Outside of that, that's the end. Please take what Guillermo said to heart. Like, even if you're not working on one of these, and don't work ahead because then class can get boring, whatever. Create a Code Wars account, create a Leak Code account, what a Hacker Rank, whatever you want to do. Like I said, we like Code Wars, and start checking out some of these. Like I said, level 8 might be honestly probably a little too easy for you at this point. But doing the JavaScript fundamentals, and you can search and you can filter specifically by level. So, right, like we can do difficulty. And so you can just say like, I only want to see 7s right now, or 8s and 7s. And then, I mean, you get in here, you can do it right in their environment in here. Like, you don't screw with anything down here. You just write your code up here. You can copy and paste this over into the replit. If you're more comfortable typing in the replit, can read this, right? So new season, new league. The new football league season is coming to Football Association. Needs some help resetting league standings. Normally the initial league standing is done in alphabetical order, but this year the FA has decided to freshen it up. It has been decided the team who finished first last season will begin the next season in first place, regardless of what their club begins with, right? And so like they give you a whole description of this, and they're basically telling you, here is it looks like the object, and they're giving it to you one Leeds United, right? And so like they're giving you a key value pair, so we know we're working with an object, and this is their ranking and the name of the team. And before, they always just set it in alphabetical order, but this time basically they're asking you to switch the positions, right? So it looks like did I read this wrong? Okay, yeah, no. So it shouldn't, it should be in order of like where they finished the last season, right? So you're manipulating the data in an object. We haven't quite done that yet. But again, we've dealt with objects and key value pairs, and this would be something that would be within, maybe it'd take you an hour or two to figure this out, or you bump me anything on Code Wars. If you have a question about it, you're always more than welcome to reach out to me, or throw it into the intro to code and tag the @self-paced TAs. We don't have time for the most part in our normal day jobs to work on algorithms for ourselves anymore, like these challenges, except for Guillermo. But always love the challenge of solving a puzzle and happy to help other people solve them. So feel free to reach out, do these, start getting some extracurricular coding in outside of this class, get the repetition in. All right, anything else for me? And I'll put a link to Code Wars in there. And if there is nothing else for me, then now I've talked for another 5 minutes, and that's the end of class, and I will see everyone on Wednesday. But if you do have questions, I'm going to pause the recording and I'm going to hang around and answer any questions anyone has.